What's up, fellas? In today's video, I gotta clear something up for some people. There are some people that are very clearly confused about a specific point in NBA history, and that is the vetoed Lakers Chris Paul trade. This weirdly is related to the Nets and competitive integrity, and it's just, we're going to be going on a bit of a rant in this video. I'll just put it that way. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel, so it's the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. If you're new here, by the way, what's up? My name is Tucker. You can also leave a like rating on the videos, and you can check me out at various socials and a Linktree link down in the description below. With those things said, let's talk about this vetoed Chris Paul trade as relates to the Nets. So the Nets thing first. Let's kind of set the stage for this. So the Nets have been adding some guys in the buyout market. They added Blake Griffin. They added LaMarcus Aldridge. They've already got, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. And some people are upset about it. They're like, oh my gosh, just give the Nets the title already. Cancel the season. People are being very, very dramatic about this Nets situation. And over the last couple of days, I've started to see some people say some really, really odd things on Twitter, right? And like some of these are significant people on Twitter. They're not just random people. And at first I saw it and I was like, okay, it's not a big deal. But people actually believe that the Nets are a competitive balance issue. Like that they are such a good team that the league should not have allowed them to sign Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. And they point to the fact that there was a point in NBA history in which the league vetoed a Chris Paul trade to the LA Lakers, in their mind, as a result of competitive integrity. Here's the thing. There's so many points to be made here. The Nets signing LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin does not make them such a dangerous team to the point where the league should have not allowed those guys to sign. It's a little bit odd that those guys both got bought out. They're big names. They're going to be able to score the ball and help this team. And they both went to Brooklyn on minimum deals. Yes, that's kind of crazy. Okay. But as we talked about in the video the other day, the Nets were scary before that. You should be much more concerned about Kyrie, KD, and James Harden than you should be about Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge, just to be clear. And this isn't prime Blake. This isn't prime LaMarcus Aldridge. It's not that big of a deal. But here's what really needs to be cleared up. Believe me when I say this. The league vetoing the Chris Paul to the Lakers trade was not about competitive balance. The league did not look at that trade and say, you know what? The Lakers are going to be just a little bit too good here. We can't let this happen. Here's why the trade was vetoed. The NBA essentially was in control of the the Hornets franchise, at the time that this trade was vetoed, okay? There were financial issues with the team. The NBA was in control. And at any point, they had the ability to step in front of the Hornets front office and say, you know what? I don't think this is the correct move. Specifically, David Stern was able to do that because they were a controlling interest in the team, just as any owner in the NBA right now. A GM could go and try and make a trade tomorrow and try and call it into the league office, but the owner would step in front of them if they don't like the move and say, no, I don't want to do that. And David Stern was essentially the acting owner of the Hornets at the time. And from his perspective, from a basketball perspective, not a perspective of the Lakers are going to be too good, but from a perspective of a controlling interest in the Hornets, said, I don't like this trade. I don't like the return we're getting as the Hornets. And yes, it's a little bit odd that the commissioner of the league vetoed a trade, but the only reason he was in position to do so was because he was essentially the acting owner of the Hornets. He was acting in the best interest of that franchise, not in the best interest of the league or trying to make the Lakers not as good of a team. Now, granted, were there some owners that spoke out against this Lakers trade, specifically Dan Gilbert writing a letter saying it was a travesty and that they should not be allowed to add Chris Paul because they were also shedding salary in the deal? Yeah, there were some owners that were upset. There's owners that were upset about every trade. You can go back to another Lakers trade when they added Pau Gasol essentially for free at a deadline in which, a couple weeks before the deadline, in which nobody really knew that Pau Gasol was available for trade, and they ended up winning some titles. That is probably a more egregious competitive balance issue than this Chris Paul trade. And David Stern looked at it and said, I don't like the return. This team, I essentially have control over this team. This isn't a good idea. It was never about the Lakers being too good and having too many good players. That's not why the trade was vetoed. So it doesn't relate to this Nets situation. Not that the Nets situation is a competitive balance issue either, at least not now. Maybe you could make a case that it is with the three guys, but it's not a competitive balance issue as a result of adding past their prime LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. But for the Lakers thing, that's never what it was about. Also, neither trade was really all that good anyway. Like the Hornets would have ended up with, let me read it here. They would have gotten Lamar Odom, Kevin Martin, Luis Scola, Goran Dragic, and a pick. That would have been what they would have gotten. Not that great of a trade, right? So when you're looking back on it, you're like, okay, makes sense that they would have declined that. They actually ended up getting Alfred Gaminu, Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, and a pick that became Austin Rivers. So either way, like you're ending up with like Aaron Gordon or Goran Dragic in exchange for Chris Paul. Either way, it's not great, right? So it made total sense for the league to say, you know what? That's not a good trade. We'll go ahead and take this other one. And people, because of some of the issues of those Clippers teams, those Chris Paul era Clippers teams, people like to say, well, if Chris Paul was on the Lakers, it would have been over. The Clippers were really good. Really, there was about a 2-year window in which the Clippers legitimately could have won an NBA title. They were one of the best teams in the West. Chris Paul was fantastic. They weren't perfect, but at times they got unlucky. At times they had really bad injury issues. And at times they just straight up choked. But if those things didn't happen, the Clippers were really, really good. They weren't a sideshow. They weren't just there for the glitz and the glamour and the Lob City stuff. Like, they were a really good basketball team. So if you wanted to make some kind of competitive balance point, I guess you could have made one about the Clippers. But the point is, the NBA is interested in having LA teams be really good. The NBA would have been completely fine with the Lakers having an outstanding team because that brings a ton of attention to their league. Stern just didn't think it was a good move for the Hornets, and that's why he vetoed the trade. Bottom line, there's no conspiracy here. There's nothing else to read into. It just wasn't a good move, and as an acting essential GM/owner, he decided, I don't want this move. I don't like this trade package that we're getting. Now, could you make the case that there are times in NBA history, and potentially you think this Nets team is one of them, in which some of the rules are heavily skewed towards bigger market teams. Some of the rules are unfair in certain points, and you could make a case that it is a competitive balance issue, how easy it is for bigger market teams to add pieces like Blake Griffin and Marcus Aldridge. Teams like the Charlotte Hornets do not really have that much of an opportunity to add guys like Blake Griffin and Marcus Aldridge during the season. Yes, you could make that case, but that's not really something that you're ever going to solve. And the league has had competitive balance problems for a long, long time as it relates to bigger markets compared to smaller markets. And they have tried to implement things to shrink that gap, but ultimately it's a difficult thing to deal with, right? When you can look at, different luxury tax stuff, salary cap stuff, the way you can re-sign players. It's difficult for smaller market teams, and essentially the only way you can create a really good team as a smaller market team is through the draft, through getting one superstar and then making subsequent moves, whether that be to get draft picks to be able to make a big trade or to be able to make a big trade as a result of your own picks and getting good players. That's pretty much the only way to make a really good team. And if you're a big market team, yeah, there are more options, okay? But that's just how it is. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But this Chris Paul veto thing is not an example of the league stepping in because a team was going to get too good and then using that as an example to say that they should have stepped in when the Nets were going to sign LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake. Was I surprised that they got LaMarcus Aldridge? Yes, but it was more so about the fact that I don't really know where Aldridge's minutes are going to come from than the fact that the Nets are now some out-of-this-world ridiculous super team. They're really good, absolutely, but there's no guarantee that they're going to win the title, just as there was no guarantee that the Heat were going to win the title in their first season when LeBron first got there. Crazy stuff happens all the time. Injuries happen all the time. And sometimes teams just don't come together, especially in a league now that relies so heavily on the three-point shot that allows for so much variance from game to game. There are no guarantees. There are no over-the-top, this team is absolutely going to win at things, because there are 4 teams like that every single year now, okay? So let's just be clear on exactly what the Chris Paul veto was and how it relates to the Nets. There was never a situation where the league looked at it and said, you know what, the Lakers are too good, we need to veto the trade. That's just simply not what happened. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the second video of the day, and I thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Check out the socials in the link tree down below if you want to hang out with me outside these videos. And yeah, I will see you all next time.